On the first of two shows we're airing here in Las Vegas, we brought you a roundtable with three leading journalists from the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, and USA Today. Now we bring you part two of our press panel's look at the cable business. From our studio in Times Square, here's our moderator, Bob Gold.
The buzzword today is multi-platform, programming going online to mobile, handheld devices. Some people might argue that the programmers are being forced into these new distribution areas because the cable operators cut such onerous deals that they've got to find their money someplace else. What's your thinking of the dynamic between the operator and the programmer, and what's going on in this multi-platform world?
Well, I mean, you've seen Disney. It's tried time and time again to try and figure out how am I in control of how I distribute my content, and so they did it with the Movie Beam, which was a bust, and now they did it through iTunes. Yeah, I mean, I think that they're constantly on the lookout for a way to get out of this.
But at the same time, they're all making tons of money off this, and the programmers are making a lot of money from cable. And I think there's a sense on their part that you don't want to kill the golden goose. I mean, a lot of them, get a large part of their revenue from the cable companies as well as from advertising. I think a lot of this multi-program emphasis that we're seeing is partly because nobody knows what's going on right now. There's so much change, and they're very concerned with what they saw happen to the music business. They really don't want to have that happen to them, and so they feel like they have to get out in front. And if there's technological innovation, they have to be part of it, even though it might not make much sense.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, everybody saw what happened in the music industry, and what was amazing about these guys is that they actually were willing to start trying something really fast out of the gate versus those guys, the music labels, which were sort of paralyzed for a long time. So, absolutely.
Is there any technology that you're currently seeing in 2007 or on the horizon in 2008 that you're keeping an eye on because it may be another game changer?
I think the Bravia is very interesting, what Sony is doing with Bravia, because they're talking about a TV that can go out and grab streaming content off the web. I think that whoever solves this whole issue of moving the web-based content to the TV is going to do it with a single device that enables consumers to get the content without having to go through a computer, which is sort of what the Apple model is. And so I think if that works, or if the Xbox continues to bring more content, or something that's already connected to the TV is bringing that content in, I think that's the technology to watch.
But we should keep in mind that TiVo is doing a lot of the things that we're talking about in terms of getting internet material over to the television set, and it's not like its sales have taken off.
No, that's true.
No, that's true.
But I think you also have to look at the content that TiVo's lining up, which is mediocre.
Obviously, we talk about Apple, but are there any technology companies that you feel are real industry leaders that are setting the bar by which others need to measure up?
Google. There's always Google.
Google's doing some interesting things with advertising right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Google would like to break into TV advertising, and I think that directed ads will probably get a little bit more of an oomph behind them because Google is out there in the wings. I also don't think Google will ever be able to get through to the cable industry, just like Microsoft tried for years to break into cable and has failed. I think Google will face the same problems. People do not want them under the tent.
Unless you're really hurting, I don't think you're going to let them in. And so as long as you have some power, some strength, then your best option is to try and figure out on your own, what Google might want to do with you and not let them in, because you have much more control that way. Yeah.
We did a count recently of how many channels, how many networks are controlled by how many companies. And something like 9 studio network companies control over 95% of all the programming that we see on television. Do you see any big issues beginning to percolate and come up this year that you're particularly keeping an eye on for your news outlets?
Yeah, what are you going to be writing about this?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you sort of, generally speaking, something that interests me is the user interface. I think the cable industry is really going to be challenged now. This FCC decision requiring the separation of the encryption from the box, I think that's going to be really important. When you start seeing lots of consumer electronics companies coming out with their own boxes and their own interfaces, And let's face it, they're going to be a lot more elegant and a lot more interesting than what cable puts up. And you can see how important it is just by looking at the Apple iPod. I mean, that's all about style and consumer friendliness.
It'll also be interesting to see whether or not search moves to the web and there's sort of an interaction between the web and the TV. You can search much more easily when you're using a mouse and a keyboard. So maybe you go to the web and you search for what's on or what's on demand. I mean, there's so many things out there that maybe those two start talking to each other more.
Yeah, I think we're going to start seeing universal guides online. You know, the search engines are going to push to the next level, which is not just simply you put in something. I think they're going to try and start putting together some kind of place, a destination or a box or whatever it would be, so that when you actually are looking for video, you can actually have something that's much more like the TV guide that you're used to.